Hello and welcome back to another update where I cover the latest developments throughout the front line in the Russo-Ukrainian war. It is your host Weep Union, and in this one there are 4 advances by the Russians in the Donetsk region. The Russians managed to advance to the northeast and to the southwest of Kosyantinivka. They also managed to advance to the southwest of Pokrovsk. Starting out in the southern part of the front line, the Russians advanced south of Horihove as they continued advances along the border area between the Donetsk and Dnipropetrovsk region. The Russians are here looking to gain full control over the border area from the northeast of Novopavlivka all the way down to the south near Dashne. Following that, the Russians will launch offensive operation towards Novopavlivka from the east, southeast, and to the south. The Russians also managed to advance west of Novomykolaivka. Following the capture of the town, the Russians have begun fighting over the town of Muravka. The Russians are here looking to gain control over the remaining parts of the border area in the northern flank as they continue fighting in the southern flank as well. To the south of Kosyantinivka, the Russians managed to gain a foothold within Alexandro and to advance to the southwest of it. The Russians are here advancing in the southern flank of Yablonivka on a wide front to gain control over the southern parts and attack the town itself from multiple directions. The Russians are facing heavy resistance by the Ukrainians along the fortified positions to the southwest of Stepanivka and north of Yablonivka. The Russians are directly storming them from the western direction, allowing them to gain the foothold within Yablonivka, and are now fighting over the settlements in the north, Poltavka and Rosynyar, to gain control over the western flank for offensive operations towards Stepanivka in the north. At the same time, they're looking to advance through the fortified positions themselves here in the north of Yablonivka. The Russians are widening the front line to the south to spread out the Ukrainian forces from a concentrated defense in the western direction, spread out in and within the town itself. At the same time, they stormed the town of Alexandro, gaining a foothold within it. Following the initial push into the town with motorcycles, the Russians managed to gain control over the first lines to the south of the town. With control over the flanks, the Russians advanced with armored personnel carriers, dropping off the infantry in the first lines leading up to the town and within the town itself. Now fighting continues within it, which the outcome of the Battle of the Alexandro will allow the Russians to physically cut off the road here to the south of the reservoir, leaving only the singular road here to the east of Reservoir to supply the Ukrainian forces in the pocket here west of Toretsk. The Russians have the choice between physically encircling this group of forces or leaving it operationally encircled as it stands right now. Finally, to the northeast of Kosyantinivka, the Russians gain control over the remaining parts of Stupushki. With full control over Stupushki, the fighting will continue over the fortified positions here to the southwest of Chasiv Yar. Russians are looking to gain control over the fortified positions along the canal to connect their forces between Chasiv Yar and Toretsk. This will allow the Russians to continue offensive operations on the eastern, northeastern, and southern flanks of Kosyantinivka. The Russians continue heavy fighting along the cities of Kosyantinivka and Pokrovsk for the operational encirclement of both cities. We are nearing the end of June, which will allow the Russians to continue offensive operations in the heat of the summer, allowing them to pass through the open fields and not being limited to the supply lines. The Russian objective is to get in as favorable as a position as possible prior to the fall season, from which sieges can begin with full strength, as the Ukrainians would be limited to only the highways and roads to supply their forces, increasing the power of the operational encirclements of both Kosyantinivka and Pokrovsk once those happen. At the same time, the Russians are about to start 2 battles over 2 cities within the Donetsk region. This will draw in a lot of supplies and forces on the Ukrainian side as well as the Russian side. However, the Ukrainians are already suffering from manpower shortage and ammunition shortage. If the Russians are able to draw in a lot of Ukrainian forces in these areas, they'll be able to strengthen their offensive operations in other sections of the front line, where the Ukrainians would have limited supplies to go to according to what they prioritize. If they prioritize the defense of the cities within the Donetsk region, the Russians will be able to attack on the flanks and in the northern section of the front line. If the Ukrainians instead prioritize defending everything else, the Russians may look to capture Pokrovsk and Kosyantinivka in quick battles, which will significantly improve the supply situation for the Russians on the western flank of the Sloviansk-Konstantinivka line and allow the Russians to have a direct entry into the Sloviansk-Konstantinivka line where they can advance through it rather than storming it head on, where the Ukrainian defenses are the weakest. Therefore, the Ukrainians will be forced to defend these cities if they want to hold on to the Donetsk region. And that is going to be all for this update. Thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out my Patreon and YouTube membership for additional content. Thank you for watching and have a great day.